Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the fascinating paradox of Ar-Rahman. So, why associate ultimate divine mercy with peak human suffering and absolute hardship? It's wild, right?
Look at this timeline. The name Rahman actually spiked when early believers faced their absolutely darkest, most painful days. Here's the difference. Rahman is God's constant, absolute state of mercy. Rahim, that's the active expression of it. This actually fueled a massive historical conflict. Why did Meccan polytheists violently reject this specific name? Well, they wanted a secular, hands-off deity. Accepting Rahman meant accepting a God who constantly intervenes and cares. Saying the Basmala totally shatters that illusion. It's a deep, active commitment acknowledging God's constant presence and support.
Take Surah Maryam. It's packed with intense stories of suffering, yet it uses the name Rahman 16 times. From Ibrahim to Muhammad, these prophets faced severe trials, but divine mercy actually guided their ultimate survival.
Think of it like this. Their intense suffering wasn't a punishment at all. It was rigorous divine training.
Which brings us to a really tough question. Can hell itself actually be a manifestation of ultimate mercy?
Consider this shocking metaphor. Hell is basically a spiritual intensive care unit for those unhealed in this world.
Because keeping a soul in existence, even in pain, is a way greater mercy than total, absolute annihilation.
Let's bring this back to you. Your calculating mind is conditional, but your innate human conscience is completely unconditional.
In fact, the conscience is the very dwelling place of Rahman's unconditional mercy, right there inside you.
Ultimately, true believers act like the sun. You've got to shine that unconditional mercy on both roses and thorns alike.
So, if ultimate mercy lives within your conscience, who are you going to shine your unconditional light on today?
Hey everyone and welcome. Today we are diving into a really profound explainer based on Mustafa Islamoğlu's deep analysis of the divine name Ar-Rahman, the ultimate source of divine mercy. And just a quick note before we jump in, we're actually going to be producing a special version of this explainer in Uyghur for our Uyghur-speaking audience, which is really exciting. But for now, let's get right into it, because the secrets hidden behind this single name are absolutely mind-blowing. Let's start with a number that might surprise you, 170. If you count every single time Bismillah is recited in the Quran, the name Ar-Rahman appears exactly 170 times. Now, this isn't just some random statistic, right? It's literally a powerful, constant reminder of just how closely divine mercy is watching over us in every single thing we do, with every breath we take. I mean, 170 times. Just try to wrap your head around that rhythm in your daily life.
But here is where it gets really interesting. Out of all those mentions, the absolute peak usage of this name, 27 times to be exact, happened specifically during the 6th year of prophethood. Now, you might be wondering, why the 6th year? What's so special about that specific time?
Well, let's take a step back and look at what was actually happening during that 6th year. For the early Muslims in Mecca, this was quite literally the peak of persecution, torture, boycotts, and unimaginable suffering. And this brings up a massive paradox, doesn't it? Why in the world would the most frequent mentions of infinite divine mercy coincide exactly with the absolute most brutal, oppressive year for those early believers? How do extreme suffering and ultimate mercy even exist in the same space?
The answer to that paradox is actually hidden in this quote. Allah educates you through the hands of the enemy. Being disciplined is not a bad thing. The source material points out that these incredibly severe trials weren't a punishment. They were actually a profound manifestation of mercy. Think of it like a really tough school. The enemy's oppression was basically the tool used to forge and prepare these believers so they could eventually become teachers to the entire world. Going through that discipline, while incredibly painful, wasn't a bad thing at all. It's like carving wood. You have to cut and chip away at it to make something beautiful.
Okay, so to really grasp this, we have to break down the theoretical difference between two core names, Rahman and Rahim. Rahman relates strictly to the divine essence. It's the foundational, universal mercy given to all of creation, without any conditions. It shines on everyone, like the sun. Rahim, on the other hand, relates to divine action. It's a targeted, specific mercy and reward that is directed specifically toward believers. So Rahman is the universal foundation, while Rahim is the targeted action.
And this perfectly sets up the difference between rahmet and merhamet. They sound similar, but they aren't the same. Rahmet is pure divine mercy. It originates entirely from Allah. Merhamet, though, is human mercy. We only have the capacity to show a merhamet because we receive and learn it from the most merciful. Basically, any mercy you or I can show is literally just a tiny little branch growing off of his infinite tree.
Let's look at how this actually plays out in the text. The chapter where Ar-Rahman is used the absolute most, 16 times, is Surah Maryam. Now, why this specific chapter? Because Surah Maryam is absolutely packed with stories of intense, agonizing trials, and it highlights a really beautiful truth. The heavier the trial and the greater the suffering, the stronger the need for the mercy of Ar-Rahman.
Just take a look at this timeline and you'll see exactly what I mean. Think about Prophet Ibrahim, literally thrown into a fire, or Prophet Zakaria and Yahya, facing brutal martyrdom. Think of Maryam herself, dealing with unimaginable slander and unable to even speak to defend herself. And Prophet Musa, placed into a basket on a river as a baby just to survive, only to be raised in the palace of his biggest enemy. Every single one of them was at their absolute most vulnerable, agonizing breaking point, and right in those moments, they required the all-encompassing mercy of Ar-Rahman.
We see this exact same pattern in the life of Prophet Muhammad too. His trials were incredibly heavy. He never had the chance to say the word father. He lost his mother at a very young age. Then he lost his grandfather, then his protective uncle, and then his beloved wife Khadija. By removing these earthly supports one by one, the source explains that Allah was essentially ensuring the Prophet didn't rely on anyone in this world, leaning entirely and completely on Ar-Rahman.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and bring this into our daily lives. Think about every time we say Bismillah. It's so common, but there are actually 5 profound secrets or declarations hidden in that one phrase. First, you're aware that Allah is actively intervening in your life. Second, you're choosing to use the intellect and will that He granted you. Third, you are actively relying on His support. Fourth, you're acknowledging that absolutely no realm exists independent of Him. And fifth, it's a constant prayer asking for His continued help. You're basically declaring all 5 of those things every single time you say it.
Now, the Meccan polytheists, they literally hated the name Ar-Rahman. Hearing it made them furious. And it wasn't because they didn't know the name. It was because accepting Ar-Rahman meant accepting a God who constantly intervenes in their daily lives. They didn't want that. They wanted to create a secular space, completely devoid of His intervention, where they could just do whatever they wanted. They were fine with a distant creator, but a God who actively watches over them with constant mercy? No way. That was a deal breaker.
Which brings us to a really provocative, almost mind-bending thought from the explainer. Hell is actually a mercy. Now wait a minute, right? If Rahman's mercy encompasses literally everything in existence, how on earth can a place of punishment like hell possibly exist? How do those two concepts even coexist? Well, it breaks down into 4 main points. First, hell fulfills the demand for divine justice. Treating the oppressor and the oppressed exactly the same wouldn't be mercy, it would be a tragedy. Second, the concept of it serves as a vital warning in this world to stop us from harming ourselves and others. Third, and this is a really powerful analogy, it acts like an intensive care unit for unhealed souls. Just like a painful medical procedure is necessary to cure a disease, it cleanses the soul. And finally, it guarantees existence. Even being in hell means you exist, which is fundamentally better than absolute, terrifying nothingness. Let's turn our focus inward for a second, to our own minds and hearts. There's a huge contrast between the human mind, or akil, and our conscience, our vigdan. The mind is always calculating. It's conditional. It's always looking for a return on investment, right? Like, if I do this, what do I get? But the conscience? The conscience doesn't calculate. It's unconditional. It's a pre-installed, natural source of giving and honoring that doesn't care who is on the receiving end. There's this beautiful quote from the source that hits the nail on the head. Conscience is Bayt Allah, meaning the house of Allah. Our human conscience is literally the direct reflection of Rahman within us. When a person lets that inner light shine, their mercy is unconditional. It shines on everyone, the good and the bad, exactly like the sun shining down, without keeping score.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a powerful question to reflect on. We've explored the depths of this infinite mercy, the trials that forge us, and the light of conscience. So, what about you? In your life, whose world is being illuminated by the mercy of Ar-Rahman shining through you? Can people feel that divine mercy just from being around you? Take that thought with you today. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly paradigm-shifting perspective on divine mercy. We're going to be looking at a profound linguistic and philosophical breakdown of the concept of Ar-Rahman, which is usually translated as the infinitely merciful. Our source material today challenges some of the absolute most basic assumptions we have about suffering, about justice, and even about how we're observed in this universe. Trust me, it's going to completely flip how you view the hardships in your life. So let's dive right in with a really fascinating metaphor from our source. I want you to imagine the most advanced tech we have today. High definition, 3D, virtual reality, the whole shebang. Now imagine a recording system that operates in 3,000 dimensions. The source proposes that if you think a standard physical camera actually captures reality, you're basically just looking at a shadow. What if there's a cosmic recording system out there that captures absolutely everything, going infinitely deeper than just the surface-level stuff of your physical actions? Section 1, the ultimate recording system, beyond HD. You know, we usually think of being recorded or seen by a higher power just in terms of what we physically do with our hands or what we say out loud. But let's look at how much deeper this actually goes. Our source brilliantly illustrates exactly how deep that cosmic camera goes, breaking it down into a 5-level system. First, yeah, it captures your actions and words. But second, it records the thoughts behind those words. Third, it peers right into the actual intentions driving those thoughts. Fourth, it logs the deep subconscious layers that form those intentions in the first place. And finally, the 5th level. It records the very source of inspiration, whether that urge came from a place of virtue or vice. Every single layer is perfectly documented. It's a pretty staggering thought, right? And we can look at the hard data anchoring these vast concepts. The name Ar-Rahman appears exactly 170 times in the Quran, and that's including the opening phrase, the Basmalah. Now, this frequency isn't just random. The usage of this term actually peaked during the 6th year of the prophetic mission, which historically was the year of maximum persecution and torture for early believers. So it begs the question, why would the term for infinite mercy peak during literally the most merciless time? Section 2, Decoding Divine Mercy, Rahman versus Rahim. To truly answer that question, we have to look at the Arabic language itself and decode the profound difference between two words that are so often translated exactly the same way in English. There's a really crucial linguistic nuance here. Rahman refers to mercy as an inherent state of being. It's mercy in its pure essence, directed internally at the divine self. It's absolute and it's unconditional. Rahim, on the other hand, is mercy in action, mercy directed outward, toward creation. A great way to visualize it is to think of Rahman as this infinite, boundless ocean of mercy, and Rahim as the actual waves reaching the shore to nourish the earth. Which brings us to another foundational term, Rab. Now, this is often translated simply as Lord, but it actually means the educator, the nurturer, the one who brings something to its ultimate perfection through Tedbiryay, or divine education. So the crucial takeaway here is that true education and nurturing must be fundamentally rooted in absolute mercy. Think about it. A teacher without mercy cannot truly educate. Section 3, the paradox of suffering, mercy and hardship. Now, if the ultimate educator is infinitely merciful, we inevitably slam right into the hardest question of human existence. Why is there so much pain, hardship, and suffering in the world? Like, how on earth is pain compatible with absolute mercy? Let's take a look at the historical record according to the text. The individuals considered the absolute most beloved by the divine, the prophets, endured the most excruciating trials imaginable. Abraham was thrown into a fire. Moses was cast into a river as an infant just to escape a tyrant. Yahya, or John the Baptist, was martyred in his youth. Muhammad endured the crushing loss of his parents, his grandfather, his uncle, and his beloved wife. If hardship just meant a lack of divine mercy, these figures should have had the easiest lives ever. But instead, they had the hardest. Our source uses this incredibly powerful metaphor to explain the paradox. Quote, "If wood had a soul, it would cry as it is cut, baked, and planed. But without this, it could never become a beautiful piece of furniture. Without being stripped and shaped, it'd basically just be destined for the fire. The pain of the saw isn't a punishment, it's craftsmanship." And this perfectly illustrates the core paradigm shift of this explainer. Hardship is not a deviation from mercy. It's the actual application of it. It is tarbiyah, divine education. Being tested by life's fires is just a sign that the ultimate craftsman is actively working on you, shaping you for a much higher purpose. Complaining about the hardship is kind of like the wood complaining about the carpenter trying to make it into a masterpiece. Section 4. Hell and Divine Justice, an intensive care unit. Okay, we're going to push this concept to its absolute limit now. Our source makes a highly provocative claim about the afterlife. How can the concept of hell coexist with a being defined by Ar-Rahman, infinite mercy? Well, the argument is that even hell itself is a manifestation of mercy. Here's the logical breakdown from the text on exactly why hell serves a merciful purpose. First, it enforces justice, because true mercy can't mean treating the oppressor and the victim exactly the same, right? Second, it acts as a deterrent in this world, preventing humans from completely destroying themselves and others. Third, it's a spiritual treatment center for those who didn't heal their souls on earth. And fourth, which is philosophically profound, it guarantees existence. Even being punished means you still exist. To be completely annihilated into nothingness, that would be the ultimate absence of mercy. So the crucial point is captured beautifully right here. Hell is the intensive care unit for souls that did not find healing in this world. It's a painful treatment for sure, but it's still a treatment rather than complete and total destruction. It's an intense purifying fire for those who basically refuse to be shaped by the gentle fires of life on earth. Section 5. The Compass Within, Basmala and Conscience. We've talked about cosmic cameras and the afterlife, but how does this idea of infinite mercy manifest in our daily, practical lives? Well, the source points to the daily recitation of the Basmala, the phrase, "In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful." Saying this phrase isn't just some mindless habit, it's a deeply intentional 5-step psychological alignment. By saying it, you 1. Acknowledge the divine presence in your current action. 2. Recognize you're acting using faculties, like your brain and hands, that were gifted to you. 3. Admit you desperately need support to actually finish the task. 4. Deny the existence of a purely secular realm where the divine is somehow absent. And 5. You actively pray for success. It completely grounds the human ego. But what if you don't actively say this phrase? Well, every single human is born with a piece of this divine mercy hardwired right into their biology. It's called Viktan, or the human conscience. The text describes the conscience as the house of God within the human being. It's literally an inner radar of divine mercy. And the knowledge it holds isn't learned from a textbook. It's innate, it's present, and it's immediate. Look at the sharp contrast the source draws here between the brain and the conscience. The intellect calculates. It uses logic, it weighs pros and cons, and because of that, it can be pretty easily tricked, corrupted, or rationalized into doing terrible things. The conscience, however, doesn't calculate. It operates on pure feeling and innate truth. Your brain can convince you that lying is a great idea right now, but your conscience will immediately make your stomach drop. The intellect can lie, but the conscience never lies. It's the uncorrupted signal of divine mercy broadcasting from inside you. Which leaves us with this final thought. If the source is right, if you are carrying around an incorruptible inner radar tuned directly to a frequency of infinite mercy, and if even your hardships are perfectly designed to shape you into something beautiful, then how are you living? If your conscience is a radar for infinite mercy, how are you reflecting that mercy in your own life today? Are you letting the carpenter shape you, or are you fighting the tools? Thank you for exploring this with me today, and as always, keep learning.
Usually when we talk about being recorded, we think about, the surface level paranoia of modern life.
Oh yeah, like security cameras on every street corner or those Ring doorbells.
Right, exactly. Or maybe just that lingering suspicion that our smartphones are listening to our conversations just to serve us like targeted ads.
Which is creepy enough on its own.
It is, but I want you to push past that today. I want you to imagine a camera that doesn't just capture 4K video or high-res audio. Imagine a 3,000-dimensional camera.
Wow, okay, 3,000 dimensions.
Yeah. This device doesn't just record the physical movements you make or the words that leave your mouth. It actually records your thoughts.
That's terrifying.
Right, and it goes deeper than the thoughts themselves. It maps the exact microscopic intentions behind those thoughts. It literally descends into your subconscious, documenting the deep-seated worldview that drives your impulses.
So it's capturing the why, not just the what.
Exactly. It records the precise source of your inspiration. So let's say you hand $1 to a person on the street. This camera documents whether you did it out of genuine empathy or out of a hidden desire to impress the person walking next to you, or just out of a lingering sense of social guilt.
It is a staggering level of surveillance to even try to wrap your mind around. You're describing a conceptual apparatus that entirely bypasses the physical realm.
Yeah.
It maps the absolute, unvarnished entirety of human consciousness. I mean, there's no PR department, there's no spin, no polite societal mask that can survive that kind of lens.
And that mind-bending concept of total, inescapable transparency is exactly the lens we are looking through today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a highly detailed, deeply philosophical, theological, and linguistic lecture by Mustafa İslamoğlu.
It's a fascinating piece of source material.
It really is. And our mission today is to deconstruct a single ancient word, Ar-Rahman. Now, in English, it's most often translated as the merciful or the compassionate. But the source material we are working with today takes this one word and turns it into a master key. A key used to decode the brutal reality of human suffering, the psychology of political resistance, the literal physics of the universe, and the ultimate purpose of our existence.
Well, to even begin tracing the weight of that single word, we first have to understand how the lecturer views the very act of communication.
Okay, lay that out for us.
So the source lays out this haunting, really beautiful framework early on. It says that spoken words are nothing more than the shadows of our thoughts.
Shadows.
Yeah. Think about the isolation of the human mind for a second. If a thought couldn't cast a shadow by vibrating through our vocal cords to create a spoken word, we would be entirely permanently trapped inside the solitary confinement of our own heads.
Wow. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to connect at all.
Exactly. And written words, like the text we read on a page, those are just the shadows of our voices cast down into ink.
So we are essentially chasing shadows today.
We are.
We're looking at an ancient text, which is the shadow of a voice, which is the shadow of a profound thought. Our goal is to trace these linguistic shadows all the way back to their origin point, which is the ultimate reality of divine mercy.
And what I found so brilliant about the source material is how it grounds this incredibly lofty, ethereal pursuit in the gritty, frustrating reality of just, well, a mundane afternoon.
Oh, the punctuality tangent.
Yes. Before the speaker even touches the etymology of Ar-Rahman, he goes on this intense, passionate tangent about punctuality.
Which is so funny. Like, I found myself pausing the material right there because we are so conditioned to accept tardiness as a quirky personality trait or just a byproduct of modern living.
Right, like, oh, I'm just running late.
Exactly. But he arrives 10 minutes late to deliver this very lecture.
Due to a traffic accident, right?
Yeah, a sudden traffic accident on the road, which in any normal setting is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. Most speakers would just casually toss out a "sorry about the traffic, folks," and jump straight to their notes.
Sure, yeah. But he stops the entire proceeding. He turns those 10 minutes into a stark philosophical breakdown of what it actually means to be late.
He doesn't use the traffic as a shield at all. He frames his own lateness as a profound moral failure.
He does. He reveals that in 16 years of delivering these comprehensive lectures, he has been late exactly 6 times. 3 or 4 times due to unavoidable traffic, once for severe winter weather, and once entirely due to his own mismanagement.
That's an incredible track record, honestly.
It is. But the core of his philosophy here is absolute. He says, time is life. It sounds like a cliche until you really deconstruct it.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does he deconstruct it?
Well, if time is the only medium in which life occurs, then wasting someone else's time isn't just a minor social faux pas. It is a literal, irreversible theft of their life. You are taking minutes they can never, ever get back.
And he points out this incredibly twisted dynamic in modern society, where the people who actually honor their commitments, the punctual ones, are the ones who end up being punished.
Yes. Think about the mechanics of a meeting or a dinner. If you show up exactly when you promised, your reward for integrity is having to sit in a chair staring at a wall, losing portions of your finite existence while you wait for the latecomers to arrive.
It's so true. I hate being the first one there for that exact reason.
Right. And the speaker argues that we have completely normalized this theft. We have accepted a standard where the reliables are penalized. Keeping a promise to be somewhere at a specific time is a baseline reflection of moral steadfastness for him.
His logic builds a really clear bridge there. If you don't respect time, you don't respect life. And if you have so little regard for human life that you steal it 10 minutes at a time, you are entirely incapable of understanding the concept of mercy.
Exactly. It is the perfect primer for the audience. You can't grasp the cosmic mercy of the universe if you don't even have the localized mercy to respect the person sitting in the chair next to you.
It just pulls the abstract right down into the immediate, and that leads us into the architectural breakdown of the language itself. The speaker turns his attention to the classic heavyweight Arabic etymology dictionaries.
We are talking about monumental texts here, like Kitab al-Ain and Lisan al-Arab.
Yeah, for centuries, these have been the undisputed, untouchable authorities on what Arabic words mean. And these foundational dictionaries claim that two specific words, rahmat and merhamet, mean the exact same thing.
They treat them as totally interchangeable synonyms for mercy.
And the lecturer completely unapologetically rejects this consensus.
He really does. He argues that treating those two words as identical violates the inherent mathematical system of the language itself.
This is where I want to offer an analogy for you listening, because the idea of true synonyms is always kind of tricky. If you have two different words, it's not just like having two identical hammers in a toolbox. They can't do the exact same job, right? It's more like the difference between the sun and the moon. From a casual glance up at the sky, they both provide light. You could call them both illuminators. But mechanically, they are entirely different realities.
That is a great way to put it.
The sun is a nuclear reactor generating its own intrinsic light from within. The moon is just a cold, dead rock that only glows because it is reflecting the light of the sun. They aren't doing the same job at all.
That sun and moon imagery perfectly captures the linguistic argument the source is making. The speaker zeroes in on a very specific grammatical distinction to prove the dictionary's wrong. Rahmat, like your son, is the overarching, foundational, originating concept of mercy. It is intrinsic.
But merhamet has a distinct structural addition. It utilizes the mim prefix in Arabic grammar.
Yes.
Let's break down that mim prefix for a moment, because this is the hinge of the whole argument. What does adding that sound actually do to the word?
So in classical Arabic, adding that specific mim prefix transforms a root concept into an infinitive of acquisition. Think of it like a vessel or a bucket.
Okay, a bucket.
The water itself is the raw essence, but the bucket is the tool you use to draw it out and carry it. By attaching the mim, the word merhamet inherently implies that the mercy being discussed is an acquired trait.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you cannot originate it. You must reach out, draw it from a higher source, and acquire it in order to possess it.
Therefore, humans are only capable of having merhamet.
Precisely. We don't generate mercy from our own raw material. We merely reflect it, like the moon in your analogy. We are only merciful because we were given access to the ultimate originating source, which is Rahman.
We don't manufacture the water, we just hold the bucket.
Yes.
That tiny grammatical shift completely redefines human kindness. But the sheer audacity of the speaker's claim here is what really stopped me in my tracks. He's essentially saying that 1,000 years of dictionary consensus is wrong.
It's a bold claim.
He states that the Quran should dictate the rules of the Arabic dictionary, not the other way around.
It is a profound argument about historical linguistics and textual preservation. Consider the timeline of the languages most of us use today. English, French, Spanish, German. They're highly structured, standardized, text-based forms only really solidify about 600 or 700 years ago.
Right.
If you go back 1,000 years and try to read Old English, it is functionally a foreign language to a modern speaker. You would need a translator to understand your own ancestors.
Meanwhile, the Quran is an unprecedented 1,400-year-old foundational text that essentially flash froze the Arabic language in a state of high preservation.
That preservation is the crux of his argument. The source posits that because the Quran is the most reliable, ancient, and mathematically structured textual witness of the language, it must act as the ultimate metric.
So if a 14th century dictionary compiler gets lazy and says rahmat and merhamet are identical, but the 7th century Quran uses them in distinctly separate, hyperspecific contexts, reserving the acquired form strictly for human interactions, then the dictionary is just fundamentally flawed.
The living text sets the rule, not the subsequent catalogs.
Okay, so we've established the architecture. We know what the word means, this foundational originating source of all mercy that we merely draw from. But understanding the definition is only half the battle. We have to look at when this specific word was deployed to the early believers.
And this is where the chronological data comes in.
Yes, the source material brings in this timeline, and the data reveals a paradox that is just incredibly difficult to swallow.
The statistical mapping provided here is fascinating. The lecturer cites a high-level bureaucrat who dedicated 11 entire years of his life to a singular, agonizingly detailed task.
11 years.
11 years, mapping the chronological entry and exit of every single concept in the Quran. He didn't just read the book, he built a temporal topography of it. He tracked exactly when a specific word was first introduced to the early believers, how its frequency spiked or dropped, and when it was phased out over the 23-year period of revelation.
That is dedication. And when you isolate the data for the word Rahman, the pattern is wild.
It really is.
The word appears 170 times in the text, including the basmala. But its usage isn't evenly distributed across 2 decades like a steady rain. It hits in massive concentrated ways.
Right.
In the 6th year of Revelation, the usage peaks drastically. It is used 27 times. And then it largely goes quiet, only to hit a second massive peak in the 12th year, where it drops 11 times.
The numbers alone don't really tell the story until you overlay them with the historical reality of what those early believers were actually living through during those specific years.
Which was horrific.
The 6th year Revelation was not an era of quiet contemplation or, spiritual retreats in the desert. It was the absolute zenith of physical and social terror for the early Muslim community in Mecca.
The peak of persecution.
We're talking about a systemic campaign of torture. People were being dragged through the burning sands, starved, economically boycotted, and murdered purely for their theological shift.
And the 12th year is arguably even darker.
The 12th year encompasses the infamous Taif period. This was the breaking point for the prophet himself. Having faced total blockade in Mecca, he walks to the neighboring city of Taif to seek asylum and a peaceful place to preach.
And they don't exactly welcome him.
Not at all. Instead of hospitality, the leadership of Taif sets the street mobs and children on him. He is chased out of the city, pelted with rocks until his shoes are literally filling with his own blood, forced to take shelter in an empty orchard, entirely isolated, rejected, and physically broken.
See, I'm struggling to reconcile this. Let's ask you, the listener. If I put myself in the shoes of someone being dragged through the hot sand in the 6th year, or sitting bleeding in an orchard in the 12th year, the absolute last thing I want to hear about is how merciful God is.
It feels like a contradiction.
It feels like gaslighting. If the universe is being run by an entity called the most merciful, why would the concept of Rahman peak exactly when people are being tortured and feeling entirely abandoned? You want a rescue mission, not a lecture on compassion.
That tension you are feeling is the exact cognitive dissonance the source material wants to address. It forces a complete redefinition of mercy. The speaker argues that we suffer from a shallow understanding of the word. We equate mercy with immediate comfort, with a lack of friction.
Right.
But the text argues that the hardship itself is the manifestation of the mercy. The early believers were being enrolled in what the speaker calls the Meccan school. They were being subjected to intense heat and pressure because they were slated to become the moral architects and teachers of the entire earth. You cannot forge a resilient, unshakable human spirit in a vacuum of comfort.
The source uses an analogy here that I haven't been able to stop thinking about: the carpenter and the wood.
Oh, this is a great one.
Imagine stepping into a wood shop. It's loud, it's violent, there is sawdust flying everywhere. Now imagine if a piece of raw timber had a soul, a consciousness, and a voice. What is it screaming as the carpenter goes to work?
It's screaming in agony.
Exactly. As its outer bark is violently ripped away, it cries, "They are flaying my skin." As it is pushed through the screeching blade of a table saw, it yells, "They are dismembering me." And when it is thrown into the intense heat of a kiln to cure, it screams, "They are burning me alive." From the limited, localized perspective of the wood, this entire process is sheer, senseless torture.
It is a brilliant shift in perspective. Because if we follow the logic of the wood, the only way for the carpenter to show mercy would be to leave the raw timber completely alone in the forest.
Just let it be.
But what is the actual fate of raw, untreated wood? It eventually just becomes firewood, it rots, or it is thrown into a stove for a few minutes of heat, and then it is reduced to ash. It amounts to nothing.
But because it is forced to endure the stripping, the sawing, the planing, and the agonizing heat of the kiln, it undergoes a profound metamorphosis. It ceases to be raw timber and becomes a breathtaking, highly valued piece of furniture. It is elevated, it is brought out of the dirt and placed inside the house, sharing the living room with the master who crafted it.
The suffering was never punitive. It was entirely developmental. It was the physical process of being crafted. When the believers in the 6th year were crying out in the agony of persecution, the sudden, overwhelming revelation of the word Rahman was a cosmic reassurance.
Wow.
It was the divine voice saying, "You are not being abandoned to rot, and you are not being thrown into the fire just to burn. You are in the workshop. You are being crafted by the master." The hardship isn't a contradiction of divine mercy. It is the active, deliberate application of it.
It fundamentally redefines mercy from continuous comfort to purposeful development. It's an incredibly empowering way to view trauma, But as the source points out, it is not a universally welcome perspective. In fact, the society observing this new theology had a deeply visceral, violent reaction to it.
They absolutely did. The text notes that the polytheist elite of Mecca, the mushriks, reacted to the mere utterance of the name Rahman like a Spanish bull seeing red. The hatred they harbored for this specific word was pathological.
Now, I've read older historical analyses that try to brush this off as a simple linguistic prejudice. You know, the theory was that Rahman had roots in South Arabian or Hebrew dialects, and the Meccans, being linguistic purists, just rejected it because it sounded foreign to their ears.
And the speaker completely dismantles that theory. To suggest that a society would torture its own citizens and wage a decade of war simply over a borrowed syllable is absurd.
Right.
The Meccans were merchants. They interacted with foreign languages every day on their trade routes. The source text argues that they didn't hate the word because they didn't understand it. They hated it precisely because they knew exactly what it meant and what it demanded of them. The friction wasn't linguistic. It was deeply psychological, economic, and political.
To really hammer home how deep this hatred went, the speaker walks us through one of the most agonizing historical scenes from the 6th year of Hijra. This is the signing of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah.
Such a tense moment in history.
Let's set the scene here, because the atmosphere is incredibly tense. The Muslims and Meccans are basically locked in a standoff. Neither side wants a bloodbath, so they sit down in the sweltering heat to hammer out a peace treaty. The Muslims have their scribe ready with parchment and ink. Mecca has sent their most ruthless, aristocratic diplomat, a man named Suhail bin Amr, to represent them.
The power dynamics in this tent are suffocating. The prophet instructs his scribe to begin drafting the document with the standard foundational phrase of the believers. In the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim.
And before the ink can even dry, Suhail immediately halts the entire negotiation. He looks at the document and flatly refuses to proceed. He essentially says, I don't know who or what this Rahman is, erase it.
He demands a secular traditional opening instead. He tells them to write, in your name, O Allah.
Right.
He is perfectly willing to acknowledge a generic concept of God, Allah, but he is willing to blow up a peace treaty and risk a massive war just to keep the word Rahman off the parchment.
And this seemingly petty dispute over the opening sentence is happening while an unfathomable human tragedy is unfolding right outside the tent. The treaty they are finalizing contains a heavily lopsided, brutal clause. If any Meccan citizen escapes the city and defects to the Muslims are legally bound by the treaty to return them to Mecca.
But if a Muslim defects to Mecca, the Meccans get to keep them.
It is a devastating concession, and right as the words are being agreed upon, a commotion breaks out. A young man literally stumbles out of the desert into the Muslim camp. He is covered in sweat, dust, and blood. He is dragging heavy metal chains around his ankles. He has just managed to escape from a torture chamber inside Mecca, and he throws himself at the feet of the Muslims, begging for asylum.
The gut punch of this story, this battered, bleeding escapee, is Abu Jandal. He's the biological son of Suhail bin Amr, the very diplomat sitting in the tent.
It is a scene of unimaginable psychological torment. Suhail looks at his own son, chained and bleeding, and turns to the Muslims. He points to the treaty that has just been verbally agreed upon and says, the deal is made. This is the first test of your word. Give him back.
The Muslims are watching this, hands on their swords, waiting for the order to intervene.
But because the treaty terms were finalized, they are forced into an impossible corner. They have to honor their diplomatic word even when it breaks their hearts. They have to tell Abu Jandal to be patient. And they are forced to stand there in silence and watch as Suhail grabs his own son by the chains and drags him back to the torture chambers of Mecca.
Suhail exhibits a level of cruelty that is almost incomprehensible. He shows absolute zero mercy to his own flesh and blood.
He embodies the exact antithesis of Rahman.
He does. But the speaker doesn't end the story in that tent. He fast-forwards the timeline. Years pass. Mecca ultimately surrenders to the Muslims without a battle. The power structures are inverted. The prophet is now in his final years, performing his farewell pilgrimage. As is the custom, he has his haircut. And in the massive swelling crowd of thousands of believers, the speaker focuses our attention on one particular man. This man is crying hysterically. He is scrambling on his hands and knees in the dirt, reverently gathering the fallen hairs of the prophet, weeping over them, wiping them against his eyes in a state of total spiritual surrender.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you ask who is this broken, weeping man in the dirt, it is Suhail bin Amr, The transformation is absolute.
It is.
The man who refused mercy to his own son was eventually consumed by the very mercy he tried to erase from the treaty.
It is a breathtaking narrative arc that brings us right back to the core mystery. Why did Suhail and the ruling elite of Mecca harbor such a venomous hatred for the word Rahman in the first place? Why go to such extreme lengths to sanitize the treaty?
The expert explains why they hated the name so much. To accept Rahman is to accept a God who is constantly, relentlessly involved in every breath of human life. The polytheists didn't mind a creator, they wanted a retired God.
A retired god is the ultimate convenience for a corrupt ruling class. It is the belief in a deity who spun the universe into existence, set the stars in motion, established the laws of physics, and then retreated to the heavens, taking an eternal hands-off approach to the earthly realm.
A God who rules the heavens but leaves the earthly, economic, and political realms to human egos.
Precisely. The Meccan elite desired a godless zone on earth. A secular space where their egos, their predatory lending practices, their slave trade, and their absolute authority could operate without any divine oversight.
Rejecting Rahman was about trying to create a zone where they could rule unchecked. If God is actively merciful and watching every detail, that inherently demands that you treat the poor, the orphans, the widows, and the slaves with that same mercy. You can't violently exploit the vulnerable if you truly believe in a God who actively watches and sustains them.
That is the crucial insight. They understood that the theology of mercy was inherently revolutionary. And that is exactly why, in direct, defiant opposition to the polytheists trying to erase the name, believers are instructed to say it constantly before any action.
Which brings us to the Basmala. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful.
Now, the text briefly touches on this fascinating three-way scholarly debate about whether the Basmala is actually the first verse of the opening chapter, Al-Fatiha, or if it's an independent separator.
The textual formatting debate is historically intriguing. But what I really want to focus on are the 5 psychological pillars. The host and expert, well, I guess that's us, we need to break down what a person is actually declaring when they say this phrase.
Let's do it. The source breaks this single sentence down into 5 towering psychological pillars.
What's the first one?
The first pillar is awareness. When you speak this phrase, you are actively declaring, I am deeply aware that God is intimately involved in life. There is no godless space. It is a direct rejection of that retired God theory.
Okay, so you're acknowledging the presence. What's the second pillar?
Attribution. By invoking the name before an action, you are saying, I am undertaking this task using the mind, the willpower, and the physical tools that God provided me. It's a reminder that you didn't invent the neurons in your own brain.
Which crashes directly into the third pillar, dependence. You are making a stark admission that without this underlying continuous support, you are entirely powerless.
And the expert holding a simple glass of water. Suddenly you receive utterly devastating, world-shattering news. What happens? Your arms go numb. You can't even lift a glass of water to your lips.
Wow, yeah. The shock just drops you.
Right. In that microsecond, your physical hardware didn't change. Your muscles didn't atrophy. Your brain is structurally the same. But the power has been cut. The animating force has abruptly withdrawn.
It proves that the true source of your capability is a constant, sustaining support system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that leads to the fourth pillar, anti-secularism. You do not believe in an existence independent from the divine. You reject the illusion of independence.
And finally, the fifth pillar is prayer. It is a silent plea. Do not deprive me of your support. Keep the power running.
It is a remarkable psychological grounding mechanism.
Now, hold on. I need to push back on this, because every time we wander into this territory of utter, total dependence, we inevitably crash headfirst into the wall of free will. If God does everything, are we just puppets? If the divine is doing all the heavy lifting, where is my human responsibility?
It is the oldest philosophical trap, and the source offers a highly nuanced view on thought to counter this. Human will initiates the action, and divine will manifests the result.
The text uses this imagery of a heavenly elevator. How does that work?
Imagine an infinite elevator shaft connecting the human mind to the fabric of reality. Human actions and choices go up this elevator. You initiate an intent. Instantly, the created consequences come down the elevator and manifest in reality. You are the instigator of the chain reaction, but the physics of reality that actually allow your choice to manifest, that infrastructure is provided by the divine.
Okay, so it's like driving a car. I am the one deciding to turn the key and press the gas pedal. But I didn't refine the gasoline, I didn't build the engine. God provides the combustion, I provide the steering.
That is perfect modern parallel. God honors the reality of human free will.
So acknowledging dependence on this mercy brings us back to the most difficult question. If God is so merciful, and if he's supplying the power, why do the most beloved people suffer the most? The speaker tackles this by taking us into Surah Maryam.
Surah Maryam is statistically saturated with the concept of mercy. The specific name Rahman appears an astonishing 16 times in this single chapter.
16 times. But look at the cast of characters in this chapter. It reads like a roster of immense human trauma. You have Abraham, thrown in a fire, forced to leave his child in the desert.
You have Zechariah and John the Baptist, or Yahya. The expert highlights a brutal irony from the text here. God named Yahya, which literally means he who will always live.
Wait, really? That's what it means?
Yes, he who will always live. Yet, God allowed him to be slaughtered like a sheep in his 30s. He was beheaded for refusing to sanction a corrupt king's incestuous marriage.
Then you have Mary, a teenage girl facing the ultimate societal slander, giving birth in the desert. And Moses, put into a river in a basket, raised by his worst enemy.
The expert synthesizes these stories using the text analogies.
Yeah.
Why would Rahman allow this? Because true mercy isn't about constant comfort.
Right.
It's like a loving mother forcing her child to drink bitter medicine. The child thinks it's torture, but the mother is acting out of pure, ultimate mercy. She knows this short-term bitterness is required for survival.
Or childbirth. The pain of labor is excruciating, but it is the only way to hold a beautiful newborn. So what does this all mean? It means if you want a great outcome, you have to endure the small pain. You can't ask for the buy one, get one free deal, but only take the free item and leave the one you have to pay for.
You have to pay the toll. Abraham's fire, Mary's isolation, Moses in the basket, Yahya's execution, these were the bitter medicine.
Speaking of Yahya, the speaker makes a bold point about his legacy. If he had compromised, he would have faded into history. But his refusal to bow immortalized him. He truly became he who always lives. The mercy wasn't a long biological life, it was an eternal legacy.
That reframing moves suffering from senseless tragedy into heavy investment, which leads us to the ultimate controversy. If earthly suffering is a form of mercy meant to craft us, what about the afterlife? How does the concept of Rahman apply to the ultimate punishment?
Yeah, how do we reconcile hell with the most merciful?
Well, the expert establishes a cosmic scale here. Everything is a manifestation of Rahman. Revelation is a mercy, brought down gradually over 23 years so society didn't break. Angels are a mercy. The hereafter is a promise of mercy.
And then the host, meaning me, has to introduce the most provocative concept of the text. Even hell is enclosed within the mercy of Rahman. I want you to walk the listener through the 4 mind-bending reasons for this, because this completely shatters how we usually think. What's the first argument?
The first argument is justice. Treating the person who brought the water exactly the same as the person who broke the jug is actually an act of evil. Hell ensures justice, which is a mercy to the victims.
Yeah, if a dictator and his victims get the same gentle afterlife, existence is just a cruel joke. Hell ensures the scales balance. What's the second?
Deterrence. The threat of it acts as a massive warning to prevent humans from destroying themselves on Earth.
Like putting a skull and crossbones on poison.
Exactly. The fear of the fire in the next life prevents the fire of oppression in this life. The third argument is the cosmic ICU.
Intensive care unit.
Right. Hell is described as a hospital for souls that refuse to heal on Earth. It is a painful treatment, but treatment is a good thing, not an evil thing.
It's the cauterization of a wound. Surgical intervention is brutal, but merciful. And the fourth argument, this is the one that really bends the mind.
The guarantee of existence. Being sent to hell means you still exist. You still possess consciousness. If God truly wanted to be unmerciful, he would simply annihilate the soul into total non-existence.
Even hell is a guarantee that God has not entirely erased you. The cord hasn't been cut.
It ties mercy to the very physics of existence. And the text notes, we have a built-in biological receptor for this mercy, the human conscience, or Vicdan.
The text defines Vicdan as the house of God and a direct branch of Rahman. It operates on pre-installed intrinsic knowledge, unlike the brain, which calculates.
When a believer internalizes this, they become like the sun. They shine mercy on both the sheep and the wolves, walk with humility, and respond to ignorance with peace.
Because they've realized they don't manufacture the water, they just channel it. Wow. To summarize this incredible journey, we went from a 3,000-dimensional camera recording our subconscious to the linguistic distinction of earned mercy, the painful crafting of the carpenter's wood, the political resistance of the polytheists, the 5 pillars of the Basmala, the bitter medicine of Surah Maryam, and finally, the shocking realization that even ultimate justice is rooted in ultimate mercy.
And this connects directly back to your daily life, whether you're dealing with a delayed commute, a painful life trial, or trying to understand the chaos of the world. Viewing it through the lens of Rahman transforms senseless suffering into a purposeful, loving, crafting process. Every cut has a purpose.
And that brings me to a final thought for you to mull over today. The source material mentioned that to even say, "I wish I was never born," is a massive logical fallacy because you need the gift of existence to even form the complaint. Think about that today. Every grievance, every pain, every frustration you have is entirely dependent on the fact that you were granted the ultimate foundational mercy of simply existing in the first place. You can't critique the script without being invited onto the stage. Until next time on The Deep Dive.
Welcome to today's critique. We are diving into a deeply passionate theological lecture exploring the Quranic name Ar-Rahman, basically arguing that true divine mercy often actually manifests as worldly hardship.
Right, and to maximize the impact of this incredible premise, we really need to jump straight into the structure, reorganizing the material around core theological arguments rather than conversational tangents will significantly elevate the narrative momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the current text starts with this extended apology about a 10-minute traffic delay.
A traffic delay. And they rationalize it by, detailing a car accident on the road, and then they go into this totally tangential history of their 16-year teaching career.
Just to point out that they've only been late 6 times.
Exactly. Which is the core weakness here. It completely buries an undeniably strong philosophical premise under, well, a mountain of logistical and numerical preamble.
It really reads like real-time classroom housekeeping. Like, when a speaker's just trying to settle a live room?
Oh, for sure. But when you transcribe that onto the page, it just acts as this massive barrier to entry. And right after that apology, you get hit with this really heavy, disjointed statistical breakdown.
Oh, right. The part about how many times the word Rahman appears in the Quran.
170 times. And they note its usage peaked in the 6th year of Revelation. So the reader is just wading through personal logistics and raw math before they ever see the actual theology.
The central thesis, the distinction between Rahman as the essence of mercy and Rahim as the action of mercy, it's just entirely suffocated by trivia.
It really is.
But, let me play devil's advocate and challenge the removal of that opening for a second.
Okay, sure.
If we strip away the traffic delay and that self-deprecating history, aren't we kind of stripping away the relatable human voice of the author?
I see where you're going with that.
Because a lot of writers use that preamble specifically to build rapport, right? To show the audience they are just a normal, flawed person. Doesn't an audience need that connection before diving into heavy theology?
Well, the desire to build rapport is incredibly common, I'll give you that. But placing those conversational elements before the core thesis dilutes the intellectual authority of the piece.
Right at the critical moment, yeah?
Exactly, right when the audience is deciding whether to invest their attention. Relatable tangents can work, but they have to be earned.
They belong later in the text.
Exactly, after you have already hooked the reader with the sheer weight of your ideas. So my suggestion here is to radically restructure the opening by leading with your strongest conceptual hook.
Make them care first?
Right, and then use the statistical data not as a standalone list, but as a supporting structural pillar for your emotional thesis.
So basically taking the data and weaponizing it so it serves the narrative rather than just, sitting there as a fun fact.
Yes, perfectly said. For a concrete example, instead of the traffic apology, the author should open directly with that powerful dichotomy they buried much later in the text.
The Al-Rahman v'Ren Rahim line?
Yes! The receiver is Rahman, the giver is Rahim. That is a stunning theological hook. You start with that philosophical punch.
You force the reader to immediately grapple with the nature of giving and receiving.
Exactly. And then, you introduce the statistic, but you frame it deliberately to prove your point. You note that the name Rahman peaked in the 6th year of the Meccan period.
And just for context, the 6th year of the Meccan period is historically known as the year of peak torture, boycott, and persecution for the early believers.
It was an era of absolute devastation.
Yeah, really horrific stuff.
Which is exactly why that statistic is so potent.
You use this specific historical data point to immediately pivot into the central thesis.
That divine mercy is often disguised as intense hardship.
Right. You tell the reader, look, the ultimate name of mercy was deployed most frequently during the absolute darkest year of human suffering.
Wow. Yeah. That is how you use a statistic in a theological argument.
You don't just say a word appears 170 times. You make the timing of those appearances prove your theology.
The numbers stop being trivia and start becoming the foundational evidence. We bridge the gap between data and philosophy.
Exactly. These are just a few out of many possible ways to reorder the introduction, but the ultimate goal remains the same. Hook the reader with the theology and not the logistics.
And I think once you hook them with that elevated theology, you have to actually maintain the environment you've just created for them.
Which brings us nicely to our next major critique, grounding the modern technological analogies within the timeless poetic language of the rest of the text will prevent jarring tonal shifts for the audience.
Because the weakness in the current draft is a pretty severe aesthetic clash, honestly. It just breaks the reader's immersion.
Words are the shadows of thought.
I love that phrase. And how writing is the shadow of sound falling onto the page.
Yes, it is a deeply contemplative, ancient way of looking at existence. It asks the reader to slow down and think about the physical nature of creation.
It invokes natural phenomena, right? Shadow, light, sound. It really elevates the listener into a highly spiritual state of mind. It builds a cathedral of words.
But then, abruptly, the text pivots to explain the concept of divine record-keeping. And instead of maintaining that beautiful imagery, the author compares God's recording of our deeds to a 3,000-dimensional HD camera.
Oh, man. And 3D movies that require special glasses?
Right. The text even jokes that if humanity eventually invents 4-dimensional cameras, God's camera will be 4,000-dimensional.
It's so jarring.
This modern, highly colloquial metaphor just clashes aggressively with the scriptural weight of the surrounding text. It rips the reader right out of their contemplative state and drops them into a consumer electronics store.
It really is the equivalent of putting a flashing neon sign in the middle of that ancient cathedral we just built. It simply doesn't belong.
Not at all.
But, let me ask you about the underlying intent here. Because assume the listener is dealing with an audience that might struggle with abstract mysticism.
Okay, I'm with you.
Doesn't a modern technological analogy help ground a very high-level concept for a lay audience? Like, if you are trying to explain divine omniscience, an HD camera is an immediate, universally understood anchor.
The intent is absolutely to build a bridge to a modern reader. The author is obviously trying to make an incomprehensible divine attribute tangible.
Right.
The problem is that the execution actively works against the timelessness of the subject matter. When you invoke HD technology and 3D glasses, you are using language that ages poorly and feels inherently artificial.
Because consumer technology is defined by planned obsolescence.
Exactly. Spiritual truths are eternal. Comparing the eternal to the disposable ultimately diminishes the eternal.
That makes total sense.
So the suggestion here is to replace or soften these technological metaphors by drawing upon the rich organic metaphors that are actually already present later in the source material.
Ensuring the tone remains cohesive and spiritually grounded throughout. So we don't even need to import an analogy from the modern world if the author has already built better tools themselves.
Precisely. To give you a concrete example of how to fix this, instead of the 3,000-dimensional HD camera analogy, the author should pull forward their own brilliant concept from much later in the text.
Oh, the part about the Vitgan?
Yes, the conscience, acting as the Beitullah, the house of God. The author should frame the divine recording not as some external security camera hovering in the sky, but as the internal, inescapable recording of the human conscience.
I love that. The conscience is the ultimate, multi-dimensional recorder. It doesn't require a lens. It requires a soul.
And the conscience naturally records intent, emotion, hesitation, regret, things a camera could never capture anyway. Using the conscience actually serves a theology much better than a camera ever could.
But what if the author is just deeply attached to the camera metaphor? Like maybe they feel it emphasizes the visual aspect of the recording.
If they absolutely must keep it, the solution is aggressive pairing. Pare it down to a single passing sentence.
Just get in and get out.
Right.
You can write, the divine record captures more than the highest definition lens. Stop there. Do not go on an extended riff about 4,000 dimensions and outdated 3D glasses.
Yeah, keep it brief.
These examples represent just a couple of avenues for maintaining tonal consistency. But the core heuristic for any writer dealing with spiritual text is this: your metaphors must live in the same universe as your theology.
Your metaphors must live in the same universe as your theology. That is a brilliant guiding principle. And I think that flows right into our final big critique today, which is about how we pace the evidence for that theology.
Definitely. Consolidating the lengthy catalog of historical and prophetic examples will sharpen the focus and amplify the emotional punch of the central thesis.
Because the core thesis here is heavy, right? True mercy involves intense hardship. But to prove this, the weakness is that the text currently lists the trials of almost every major prophet sequentially.
It's exhausting. We're given Abraham being thrown into the fire, Zechariah's trials, Yahya being martyred, Mary facing horrific slander.
Jesus' lifelong struggle, Moses being cast into the river as an infant, and Muhammad's loss of his family. It really just becomes an encyclopedic rundown of suffering.
And immediately after this marathon of prophetic suffering, the text dives into a highly detailed, multi-year narrative about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah and the specific story of Suhail bin Amr.
It's so much data.
While every single one of these stories is undeniably rich and profound on its own, presenting all of them back-to-back creates a massive pacing drag.
What starts as a compelling philosophical argument turns into a historical roll call.
Exactly. The reader actually begins to experience empathy fatigue. They become numb to the suffering because they are just processing data point after data point.
Right. When you stack that much trauma back to back, the brain stops feeling the emotional weight of the individual stories and just categorizes them as a list of evidence.
Yes, exactly.
But again, playing devil's advocate, if you were writing for an audience deeply embedded in this theology, aren't they going to feel shortchanged if we cut out their favorite historical figures?
I hear that concern a lot.
Like, if I'm a reader deeply moved by the story of Moses, wouldn't I feel something is missing if his specific trials aren't detailed in a piece about divine mercy?
The fear of omitting someone's favorite story is exactly why writers end up with these massive, unwieldy lists. But in editorial strategy, less is always more.
Always.
Overwhelming the reader with proof ultimately dilutes the emotional resonance of your strongest examples. Think of it mechanically. If you strike a bell once, the sound reverberates and fills the room.
Beautiful.
But if you strike that same bell 50 times in rapid succession, you don't get music, you just get noise.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
We want the emotional reverberation. So the suggestion is to select two highly contrasting historical narratives to act as primary, in-depth case studies, and trim the rest to create a tighter emotional arc.
Which forces the author to make tough editorial choices, right? Trusting that the audience will understand the broader pattern without needing every single piece of evidence spelled out?
Exactly. So here is a concrete example of how to execute this consolidation. Keep the profound story of Prophet Yahya, also known as John.
Because the author already points out that brilliant paradox, right? That his name literally means he lives, yet he was brutally martyred at 31 years old.
Yes. This is the ultimate, undeniable example of mercy disguised as tragedy. You expand on this. You let the reader sit in the absolute discomfort of that paradox.
Really feel the weight of it.
You let them feel the weight of a young man dying unjustly, and you force them to reconcile that with the concept of Ar-Rahman. Then, you pair this with the Suhail bin Amr story from the Treaty of Hudaybiyah to show the exact flip side of the coin.
The Suhail bin Amr story is so critical here because it represents mercy toward an oppressor rather than mercy toward an innocent.
Right, he fought against the believers for years, yet decades later he is weeping out of love and regret.
So you have the innocent martyr and you have the forgiven oppressor. Two vastly different, highly contrasting examples of Ar-Rahman's mercy working through the crucible of hardship.
And for the rest of the prophetic list, cut the detailed breakdowns entirely. Summarize them in a single powerful sentence.
Just one sentence?
Yeah. For example, the author could write, "This harsh mercy is the same thread weaving through Abraham's fire, Mary's slander, and Moses' river."
That is all you need.
Oh, I see. The audience already knows those stories. You are just nodding to them to show the pattern.
Exactly. And immediately following that deep dive on Yahya, bring in the author's excellent analogy of the mother giving her child bitter medicine.
Because when you stack the story of Yahya dying young right next to the metaphor of a mother forcing her child to swallow bitter medicine, the causality becomes perfectly clear to the reader.
You explain how the hardship is functioning as medicine. But if there are like 5 other stories in between the hardship and the medicine metaphor, the reader loses that connective tissue.
It gets lost in the noise.
By isolating the 2 best examples, you give the reader the cognitive and emotional space to actually process the magnitude of what the text is claiming.
And again, these are just a few ways to solve the pacing issue. I mean, the author could easily swap Yahya for Mary or Moses, provided the overall list is drastically reduced, right?
Oh, absolutely, as long as that contrasting dynamic is maintained.
It's all about making sure the forest isn't obscured by a dense thicket of incredibly interesting, but ultimately distracting trees.
Well said. By pacing the emotional beats, you allow the theology to breathe.
We really have covered a lot of ground today, looking at how to take an already deeply passionate piece of writing and sharpen it into something unforgettable. Let's briefly recap the 3 main takeaways from this critique.
Sure thing.
First, we addressed the structure of the opening. The text must lead with the core thesis, the profound dichotomy of Rahman and Rahim, rather than burying that hook under conversational apologies and statistical occurrences.
Second, we focused on harmonizing the tone. Jarring modern analogies like the 3,000-dimensional high-definition camera need to be replaced or heavily minimized.
Right. Swap those out in favor of the beautiful, organic, poetic metaphors like the conscience being the house of God that already exist within the text.
And finally, we tackled pacing by consolidating the heavy catalog of historical examples.
By selecting just 2 contrasting, powerful narratives to serve as deep dive case studies, the text will amplify the emotional resonance of the thesis rather than exhausting the reader with a rolling list of facts.
So the actionable summary for our listener is clear. Pull your strongest thematic hook to the absolute front of the piece. Aggressively align your metaphors with your desired spiritual tone, and practice editorial restraint by choosing only the most potent examples to support your arguments.
Because the raw material here is incredibly strong.
Oh, definitely. The author has a firm grasp on the emotional core of this theology, and I genuinely believe applying these structural and tonal edits will unlock the text's full potential.
We highly encourage the listener to apply these edits, reshape the material, and submit the revised work back to us for another critique. We would honestly love to see how this piece evolves.
I can't wait to read the next draft.
Going back to where we started, divine mercy in this text isn't the soft, comforting blanket we so often want it to be. It is the woodworker's chisel.
Yeah.
And in many ways, the editing process is exactly the same. Cutting away the excess, facing the friction, and enduring the discomfort of revision. Also, the true form beneath can finally be revealed.
Welcome to the debate. Imagine a historical moment where innocent people are being systematically starved, persecuted, and just, well, tortured to their absolute breaking point.
Right, a truly bleak period.
Exactly. Now imagine that right in that agonizing moment, specifically the 6th year of prophethood in Mecca, the term most frequently invoked to describe the divine is Rahman, which is the ultimate expression of mercy.
Yeah, it peaks at, 27 times during the worst suffering imaginable?
27 times, yes. And that is the exact paradox we're unpacking today. We're looking at this detailed etymological and historical text to figure out how this makes any sense.
And it completely shatters our conventional understanding of compassion. I mean, it really does.
How so?
Well, we normally expect mercy to be a reprieve, right? Like an exemption from hardship. A warm blanket you wrap yourself in when the storm gets too rough. But the data we are examining today forces us to look at an intervention that functions more like a crucible.
A crucible?
Yeah, a system that diagnoses and treats human flaws through immense, crushing pressure.
Right. So we are looking at whether Rahman is fundamentally a nurturing, protective force that utilizes life's harshest trials to elevate humanity.
Or conversely, if it operates as a framework of absolute control that leaves basically zero room for human choice.
Right, an authority that redefines the very concept of suffering into a mechanism of sovereign control.
Exactly. And to really understand how radical this framework is, you have to look at the foundational distinction the text makes between two related concepts, which are Rahim and Rahman.
Well, let's break that down, because Rahim is conditional. It's directed at actions, right?
Yeah, it ebbs and flows based on what we do.
Right, almost like a responsive pardon. You do good, you receive Rahim. But Rahman is entirely different. It is the unconditional essence of the divine.
It's the foundational architecture of reality itself.
Exactly. It is an all-encompassing grant of existence and guidance that operates whether you ask for it or not.
Which is where the concept starts to get incredibly heavy, honestly, because an all-encompassing architecture of existence sounds beautiful until you realize it actually means absolute, unblinking omniscience.
Well, but it's an architecture of profound generosity, not just cold surveillance. I mean, think of a standard camera, right?
Okay.
It just captures what you did physically in a specific moment. The conceptual framework here describes Rahman as acting like a 3,000-dimensional camera.
A 3,000-dimensional camera?
Yeah. This system doesn't just record the physical action, it captures the why. It records your surface thoughts, the deep intentions behind those thoughts, the subconscious driving those intentions.
And even the subtle inspiration feeding that subconscious, which to me is the definition of totalizing surveillance. Every single microscopic impulse is tracked.
But look at how that omniscience is used. A punitive system would use that deep subconscious tracking to condemn you, for every dark, fleeting thought you ever had.
Sure, but
Rahman uses it to reward unacted good intentions. It captures the spark of a good intention that you were perhaps too scared or too poor or too weak to actually execute, and it credits you for it anyway.
As if the deed were physically done?
Exactly. That proves an inherently generous nature. It demonstrates that true mercy is active. The text argues it is inextricably linked with Tedbiryay, which translates to education, cultivation, and discipline. A passive creator who just lets us rot in our own unfulfilled potential, well, that wouldn't be merciful.
I hear you, but I look at that exact same dynamic and I see an inescapably terrifying authority.
Terrifying? Really?
Yes. Yes, it captures the unacted good intention, sure, but by linking mercy so completely with Tedbiryay, with this rigorous, inescapable discipline, the framework completely shatters any intelligible understanding of the word mercy.
But how does discipline shatter compassion? I mean, you cannot cultivate anything without discipline.
Well, let's go back to that counterintuitive fact you opened with. The highest frequency of the word Rahman occurs exactly during the peak of torture in Mecca.
Right.
Believers were being brutalized. And the argument presented is that this specific timing was deliberate. It frames the torture itself as a manifestation of Rahman.
It calls that environment a school, yes, a necessary training ground.
But when you frame literal torture, the slaughter of innocents, and starvation as manifestations of mercy, you aren't talking about compassion anymore. You are redefining human suffering as merely a feature of divine control.
I don't think that's...
You are basically saying to the victim, your agony is actually my benevolence.
Okay, but think about the analogy of the carpenter from the text. If a piece of raw wood had a soul, it would scream in agony during the carpentry process, wouldn't it?
Well, sure.
From the wood's limited, immediate perspective, it's experiencing sheer, senseless torture. It's thinking, they're stripping my bark, they're running me through a planer, they're baking me in a kiln. It's a total violation of its natural state.
It's a complete destruction of what it originally was.
Right, but what is the outcome? Without that excruciating process, the wood doesn't magically become a beautiful, polished piece of furniture that gets to share a home with the carpenter.
It rots in the forest.
Or it ends up as firewood and just burns. The suffering is the exact, precise mechanism that prevents a far worse fate. And we see this historical pattern constantly.
Such as?
Look at Moses. As an infant, he is cast into a raging river. That is a terrifying abandonment.
True.
He's then raised in the very palace of the tyrant who is actively trying to eradicate his people. It's a life of profound psychological stress and constant trial. But the text argues that is Rahman's protective orchestration.
By putting him in the lion's den.
Exactly. How else do you extract Moses from a broken system, educate him in the halls of power, and elevate him unless you put him through that specific crucible? The discipline itself is the mercy.
Okay, but that logic completely falls apart when you look at Prophet Yahya, or John as he's also known.
Why does it fall apart?
Because the carpenter analogy works for Moses since Moses survives, right? He survives and leads his people. But the historical record regarding Yahya presents a devastating contradiction to this whole idea of a protective, nurturing crucible.
I mean, the tragedy of Yahya is profound, yes, but it doesn't break the underlying logic.
It absolutely breaks the logic of the carpenter. Look, God literally names this prophet Yahya, which translates to he who lives or he who always lives.
Right, that's the literal translation.
So the system gives him this name, knowing exactly how his biological life is going to end. He takes a moral stand. He refuses to sanction the corrupt marriage of King Herod, and for this righteous act, at the age of 31, he is slaughtered.
Yes, he is beheaded.
A brutal end to a physical life. And yet, this brutal execution of a 31-year-old is justified under the banner of Rahman by saying, well, his legacy survives 2 millennia later, so he is living in our hearts.
I think that's a bit reductive.
Look, I have to stop you there because we cannot reduce the visceral, biological reality of human pain and violent death to a mere rhetorical device. Can we truly call the beheading of a young man mercy just because we are analyzing his legacy centuries later?
But
if being slaughtered like a ram is defined as mercy, then the word has been entirely emptied of its meaning. It no longer means compassion. It simply means whatever the sovereign authority decides to do to you.
But viewing Yahya's physical death as a final tragedy relies entirely on a human biological lens. You're looking at mortality as an absolute end.
Because for us, it is.
But the framework of Rahman forces us to adopt a metaphysical lens. It argues that physical death is not the ultimate tragedy. The only true tragedy is non-existence.
Okay, wow.
Which forces us to confront the most difficult, extreme aspect of this entire conceptual framework, which is hell.
Ah, yes, the ultimate test of any definition of divine mercy.
Precisely. Because if Rahman is truly the all-encompassing foundation of reality, it must account for hell. It can't just be the god of the flowers and the rain, you know? It must be the god of the fire, too.
And how does the text reconcile that?
The argument posits hell fundamentally as an intensive care unit.
An intensive care unit?
Yes. If a soul becomes entirely corrupted, if it refuses to process its spiritual disease on earth, it enters the intensive care unit of the afterlife. The treatment is excruciating, yes, but the goal of a hospital is not to torture.
Wait, but
the goal is to process the disease that the patient willingly allowed to fester.
An eternal intensive care unit is an Orwellian contradiction in terms. I mean, think about it. If a doctor puts you in an ICU and sets you on fire forever to cure you, no rational human being looks at that and sees a compassionate doctor.
But you have to pair the ICU concept with the second, more profound argument the text makes. Hell as a guarantee of existence.
A guarantee of existence?
Yes. Because the divine essence is Rahman, it will not allow the ultimate tragedy to occur, which is to be uncreated, to be plunged back into the void of nothingness.
Okay.
Forcing a soul to exist, even if that existence is in the agonizing state of an intensive care unit, is fundamentally an act of Rahman, because it preserves the entity.
That is quite a leap.
Think about the sheer philosophical weight of this. Even when a person in that state cries out, "I wish I were never created," they are only able to formulate that thought. They're only able to conceptualize their complaint because they possess the gift of existence. The very foundation of their complaint is the mercy they are complaining about.
I want to pause on that actually, because that is a staggering philosophical claim to say that the ability to suffer and complain is itself proof of a benevolent grant of existence. I mean, it is a brilliant piece of logic.
Thank you.
But it is also a brilliantly designed circular trap.
Why is it a trap? It's a logical absolute. You cannot critique existence from a state of non-existence. You need the platform of life to even express a desire for death.
It's a trap because it operates like the game you didn't ask to play, A game where the absolute authority has written the rules such that even your absolute agony proves their benevolence.
I think you're mischaracterizing the intent.
What is actually being described here is not relief. It's not care. It is absolute dominion. It proves that Rahman is a system ensuring that zero entities escape the sovereign's control, not even through the release of non-existence.
But
you are forced to exist so that you can be processed and punished. That is an architecture of unyielding, inescapable authority, not nurturing love.
look, you're calling it a trap because you are elevating the human desire for autonomy above all else. You're treating the desire to opt out, the desire to choose non-existence, as if it is some sacred, rational right.
Because autonomy is foundational to the human experience.
But humanity's grasp on autonomy is deeply flawed. It's often completely destructive, and the historical analysis of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah perfectly illustrates why this absolute intervention is completely necessary.
Right, the diplomatic standoff between the early Muslims and the Meccan polytheists.
Yes. So during the drafting of this peace treaty, the Prophet dictates the opening line, "In the name of Rahman, the Rahim," and the Meccan diplomat Suhail bin Amr violently objects.
He refuses to allow it on the parchment.
He says, "I don't know who this Rahman is," and demands they use a generic, distant term like, "in your name, O God." Now, Suhail was an educated diplomat. He wasn't ignorant of the word linguistically. His rejection was deeply ideological.
He understood exactly what the word implied, and he was rejecting the implication.
Exactly. Accepting Rahman means accepting a God who intimately intervenes in every single micro-interaction of life. It means accepting that you are entirely dependent on this 3,000-dimensional camera that tracks your every breath and intention.
Right.
Suhail's rejection is the ancient equivalent of modern secularism. It's the arrogant human illusion that we can carve out a domain without God. The desire to say, God can rule the heavens, but I rule my household. I rule my economy. I rule my neighborhood. Suhail rejected Rahman because he wanted to preserve his own absolute autonomy.
I actually think that is a profound historical analysis. The psychological link between Suhail's rejection of the word and the human desire for a secular, autonomous space is incredibly sharp.
It really is.
But let's look at the horrific reality of what Suhail bin Amr was actually doing with his coveted autonomy.
He was preserving his social order.
He was torturing his own flesh and blood.
Well,
he was so fiercely resistant to this totalizing system of Rahman that he imprisoned and tortured his own son Abu Jandal for trying to join the Muslims.
It was a brutal time.
The historical account is visceral. The son escapes. He drags his heavy iron chains directly into the treaty negotiations, bleeding, begging for political asylum, and what does the system do?
The treaty demands he be returned.
The treaty demands he be returned to his torturer father. The prophet is forced by the terms to return the boy to the crucible. The system of Rahman allows the boy to be dragged away in chains.
Yes, but because the system is operating on a timeline we cannot see. Look at the psychological and spiritual mechanism of what happens next. Years later, Suhail bin Amr converts.
Sure, eventually.
He submits, and he is seen weeping out of profound love for the Prophet. How did that happen?
I'm sure you'll tell me.
The system of Rahman essentially cornered him by forcing him to experience the absolute extremes of his own brutal autonomy. By making him look at the bloody chains on his own son, the system showed him the ugly, catastrophic limits of his own ego.
Okay, but
it broke his defiance from the inside out until there was nothing left to do but submit and heal. The trauma was the surgical tool that broke his arrogance.
He submits, yes, but observe the mechanism of that submission. He does not submit to a gentle, requested grace. He is ground into dust by a conquering force.
It's not a conquering force,
It is an inescapable sovereign net. It utilizes extreme trauma, allowing a son to be dragged away screaming in iron chains to eventually break a father's ideological resistance years later. You call it a surgical tool. I call it a relentless, calculated grinding down of human defiance.
Because the defiance was destroying him.
It highlights exactly what I have been arguing all along. Rahman is a mechanism of total submission, utilizing whatever suffering is necessary to assert its absolute authority over the human illusion of independence.
But that breaking of defiance is precisely what is necessary for true liberation. Look, if a bone heals incorrectly, a surgeon has to re-break it so it can be set straight.
A violent metaphor.
But accurate. If the bone possessed consciousness, it would agree with you. It would call the surgeon a tyrant. It would call the hammer a conquering force. But we have to view this from the perspective of the completed healing.
If you survive the break.
The ultimate goal of Rahman is not to crush the human spirit. It is to save it from the ultimate tragedy of disconnecting from the source of all existence. True, divine mercy cannot be a passive, polite suggestion. It must be a fiercely active, intervening force.
Even if it involves eternal fire.
Yes, if it requires the intense discipline of the carpenter, the historical trials of Moses, the biological sacrifice of Yahya, or the grueling processing of the afterlife to elevate human existence and prevent the void, then that is the absolute definition of profound love.
Look, I understand the internal logic of that framework, and it really is a highly integrated, sophisticated theology.
It is.
But its relentless commitment to branding every single action as mercy is where I remain profoundly skeptical. When you take the peak of historical torture in Mecca, the literal beheading of a young prophet, a son dragged in chains by his father, and an eternal intensive care unit of fire, and you place all of those under the banner of Rahman,
yes,
you are no longer talking about compassion in any sense that a human heart can recognize. You are describing a system of inescapable, sovereign control that demands total, unquestioning human submission to its own definitions. It is a system that dictates that your pain is simply evidence of its power to cure you.
Well, it seems we've arrived at a vital intersection here. We both clearly agree that this conceptual framework demands a highly sophisticated, multidimensional reading of the divine.
Absolutely.
It completely rejects the notion of a detached creator, just passively observing the universe from a distance.
Oh, there is absolutely no room here for a hands-off deity. The intervention is microscopic, it is constant, and it is entirely inescapable.
Right. But where we continue to disagree is how to interpret the nature and intent of that inescapable intervention. I look at this rigorous, sometimes agonizing system, and I see the ultimate expression of profound, protective love. A mercy so vast, so deeply committed to our ultimate survival, that it is willing to hurt us in the short term to save us in the eternal term.
And I read the exact same historical and philosophical evidence as the ultimate manifestation of unyielding authority. A system so totalizing and absolute that it literally redefines our very suffering as proof of its dominion, leaving absolutely no room for human autonomy.
Which leaves us circling right back to the paradox we started with. When you look at the concept of Rahman, you are not handed a warm blanket to hide under.
Definitely not.
You are thrown into a crucible that demands you rethink everything you know about compassion, justice, autonomy, and pain. It is up to you, the listener, to grapple with these complex definitions of mercy and suffering yourselves. There is so much more to explore in the depths of this material. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
This is the brief on the concept of Ar-Rahman. We're looking at a source that breaks down this really profound Islamic concept of Ar-Rahman, which means the most merciful, and it's going to completely flip how you think about hardship, education, and divine intervention. First, you've got to look at the surprising timing of when this word actually shows up in the Quran. Its usage peaks during the early Mecca period, which was literally the absolute height of torture and persecution for those early believers. So why then? Well, think about a surgeon. Would you call them cruel for cutting you open to save your life? Obviously not. Just like that surgery, divine mercy often shows up as these really painful trials specifically designed to heal and elevate us. Second, those painful trials aren't just random. They actually lead directly to growth. This makes perfect sense when you realize that Ar-Rahman is closely linked to the word Rab, which translates to Lord or Educator. It basically shows us that true education and discipline, they have to be rooted entirely in mercy, not anger. Finally, this whole idea of a hands-on, actively educating God explains something really fascinating about the ancient Meccan polytheists. They didn't violently reject the name Ar-Rahman just because it sounded like some foreign word. No, they rejected it because accepting an infinitely merciful God meant accepting a God who constantly intervenes in our daily lives. And honestly, they just wanted to live entirely on their own terms, totally free from any divine meddling. Ultimately, Ar-Rahman really isn't about passive kindness. It's this active, deeply involved force that uses both our trials and our triumphs to relentlessly shape human existence.
This is the brief on the theological concept of Ar-Rahman. Today, we're unpacking a lecture by Mustafa İslamoğlu that radically redefines the Islamic concept of divine mercy, showing it's not just passive pity, but a rigorous, transformative force. First, let's look at some surprising timing. The name Ar-Rahman, meaning the most merciful, appears 170 times in the Quran, but its usage spiked dramatically during the 6th year of revelation. Why is that crazy? Well, because that was a period of intense torture for early Muslims. Think of a piece of wood crying out as it's cut and sanded, totally unaware it's being crafted into beautiful furniture. Could severe hardship actually be the ultimate form of merciful training? Second, this idea of training connects mercy straight to education. The text closely links Rahman with Rab, which means Lord, but fundamentally educator. If I asked you to name a teacher's most indispensable trait, you'd probably say knowledge, right? But the text pushes back, arguing that without mercy, true education is completely impossible. Finally, how do we interact with this active mercy every day? Through the daily recitation of Bismillah, in the name of God, the most merciful. Saying this before tasks isn't just habit. You're actively rejecting living independently from God, recognizing your total reliance on Him. Imagine getting news so devastating that your muscles go weak, leaving you unable to even lift a glass of water. If our own bodies can fail us that easily, who's truly powering our actions? True divine mercy isn't just about comfort. It's an active, sometimes challenging, and deeply necessary force that shapes and sustains our entire existence.
This is the brief on the concept of Rahman in the Quran. We're distilling a powerful lecture by scholar Mustafa İslamoğlu on the divine name Ar-Rahman, or the most merciful, revealing how understanding this one word completely transforms how we view life's toughest hardships. First, we got to clear up the crucial linguistic difference between two names, Rahman and Rahim. While both translate to merciful, Rahman relates to God's inherent, unchanging essence, whereas Rahim refers to his specific actions. It's kind of like the difference between someone possessing a fundamentally loving nature, right down to their core, versus someone who simply performs an isolated loving act. Second, the data on when Rahman is used most in the Quran is wild. Its frequency actually peaked in the 6th year of revelation, appearing 27 times, particularly in a chapter called Surah Maryam. Now, that specific year was the absolute peak of torture and intense hardship for the early Muslims. Wait, why would God emphasize his ultimate mercy the most, right when his followers were facing their darkest, most painful days? Finally, the answer is that hardship is a manifestation of divine mercy. It's a process of divine education and purification, known as Tedbiryay. Think about raw wood. If it had feelings, it would literally scream in agony as it's cut, planed, and sanded. But if it didn't go through that painful shaping process, it could never become a beautiful piece of furniture. It would just be thrown into the stove as firewood. True divine mercy isn't just about providing comfort, but rather the rigorous, sometimes painful process of shaping us into something far greater.
This is the brief on the divine name Ar-Rahman and its profound meanings in the Quran. We're looking at Mustafa İslamoğlu's lecture on how ultimate divine mercy completely upends our human understanding of hardship, justice, and surveillance. First, God uses a 3,000-dimensional camera. Unlike our 3D movies, it captures your thoughts and their exact inspiration. It's kind of like capturing a software's hidden source code, not just the user interface you see. Since God knows our most hidden flaws, how does he respond? Well, that leads to hardship. Second, hardship is divine education. The name Ar-Rahman, the merciful, actually peaks during extreme struggle. It spiked during severe persecution in the 6th year of prophethood and pops up 16 times in Surah Maryam, a chapter about prophetic struggles. But wait, how can suffering be mercy? Think of wood. It might cry out when sawed and sanded, but it must endure that to become valuable furniture instead of firewood. So if earthly trials are mercy, what about the ultimate punishment? Finally, even hell is framed as mercy. It acts as an afterlife intensive care unit, a deterrent, and an instrument of justice for souls that didn't heal on earth. It's like a loving mom forcing her kid to swallow bitter medicine. It feels like torment, but her motive is pure compassion. Ultimately, the concept of Ar-Rahman reframes every aspect of existence, from hidden thoughts to painful struggles, as deliberate divine education and compassion. So, the next time you face a painful test, you have to ask yourself, are you just suffering, or are you being carved into something greater?
Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the fascinating paradox of Ar-Rahman. So, why associate ultimate divine mercy with peak human suffering and absolute hardship? It's wild, right?
Look at this timeline. The name Rahman actually spiked when early believers faced their absolutely darkest, most painful days. Here's the difference. Rahman is God's constant, absolute state of mercy. Rahim, that's the active expression of it.
This actually fueled a massive historical conflict. Why did Meccan polytheists violently reject this specific name?
Well, they wanted a secular, hands-off deity. Accepting Rahman meant accepting a God who constantly intervenes and cares.
Saying the Basmala totally shatters that illusion. It's a deep, active commitment acknowledging God's constant presence and support.
Take Surah Maryam. It's packed with intense stories of suffering, yet it uses the name Rahman 16 times. From Ibrahim to Muhammad, these prophets faced severe trials, but divine mercy actually guided their ultimate survival.
Think of it like this. Their intense suffering wasn't a punishment at all. It was rigorous divine training. Which brings us to a really tough question. Can hell itself actually be a manifestation of ultimate mercy? Consider this shocking metaphor. Hell is basically a spiritual intensive care unit for those unhealed in this world.
Because keeping a soul in existence, even in pain, is a way greater mercy than total, absolute annihilation.
Let's bring this back to you. Your calculating mind is conditional, but your innate human conscience is completely unconditional.
In fact, the conscience is the very dwelling place of Rahman's unconditional mercy, right there inside you. Ultimately, true believers act like the sun. You've got to shine that unconditional mercy on both roses and thorns alike.
So, if ultimate mercy lives within your conscience, who are you going to shine your unconditional light on today?
This is the brief on the divine name Ar-Rahman and its profound meanings in the Qur'an. We're looking at Mustafa İslamoğlu's lecture on how ultimate divine mercy completely upends our human understanding of hardship, justice, and surveillance. First, God uses a 3,000-dimensional camera. Unlike our 3D movies, it captures your thoughts and their exact inspiration. It's kind of like capturing a software's hidden source code, not just the user interface you see. Since God knows our most hidden flaws, how does he respond? Well, that leads to hardship. Second, hardship is divine education. The name Ar-Rahman, the merciful, actually peaks during extreme struggle. It spiked during severe persecution in the 6th year of prophethood and pops up 16 times in Surah Maryam, a chapter about prophetic struggles. But wait, how can suffering be mercy? Think of wood. It might cry out when sawed and sanded, but it must endure that to become valuable furniture instead of firewood. So if earthly trials are mercy, what about the ultimate punishment? Finally, even hell is framed as mercy. It acts as an afterlife intensive care unit, a deterrent, and an instrument of justice for souls that didn't heal on earth. It's like a loving mom forcing her kid to swallow bitter medicine. It feels like torment, but her motive is pure compassion. Ultimately, the concept of Ar-Rahman reframes every aspect of existence, from hidden thoughts to painful struggles, as deliberate divine education and compassion. So, the next time you face a painful test, you have to ask yourself, are you just suffering, or are you being carved into something greater?
This is the brief on the concept of Rahman in the Quran. We're distilling a powerful lecture by scholar Mustafa İslamoğlu on the divine name Ar-Rahman, or the most merciful, revealing how understanding this one word completely transforms how we view life's toughest hardships. First, we got to clear up the crucial linguistic difference between two names, Rahman and Rahim. While both translate to merciful, Rahman relates to God's inherent, unchanging essence, whereas Rahim refers to his specific actions. It's kind of like the difference between someone possessing a fundamentally loving nature, right down to their core, versus someone who simply performs an isolated loving act. Second, the data on when Rahman is used most in the Quran is wild. Its frequency actually peaked in the 6th year of Revelation, appearing 27 times, particularly in a chapter called Surah Maryam. Now, that specific year was the absolute peak of torture and intense hardship for the early Muslims. Wait, why would God emphasize his ultimate mercy the most, right when his followers were facing their darkest, most painful days? Finally, the answer is that hardship is a manifestation of divine mercy. It's a process of divine education and purification, known as Tedbiryay. Think about raw wood.
If it had feelings, it would literally scream in agony as it's cut, planed, and sanded. But if it didn't go through that painful shaping process, it could never become a beautiful piece of furniture. It would just be thrown into the stove as firewood. True divine mercy isn't just about providing comfort, but rather the rigorous, sometimes painful process of shaping us into something far greater.